Senator Vance, congratulations on the success of Hillbilly Elegy. It truly resonated with people. Jasmine Crockett began, smiling across the committee table. J.D. Vance returned her smile, settling into his seat. Finally, a friendly question. Thank you, Congresswoman. I wrote it because I felt the people of Appalachia, the working-class communities I grew up in, were not being heard. They needed someone to tell their story. Exactly, she replied. Someone authentic, someone who truly understood their struggles. Yes. Vance's smile widened. He knew how to talk about the book, he'd done it countless times. Crockett nodded slowly, flipping through a folder. So you wrote about their pain, their addiction, their economic devastation. You gave them a voice. I tried to. Yes. And then you moved to San Francisco. His smile faltered. I'm sorry, San Francisco, Silicon Valley, right after the book came out. You took a job at Mithro Capital. That's Peter Till's firm, correct? Vance shifted slightly. I worked in venture capital for a few years, yes. How many factories in Appalachia did Mithro Capital invest in? Silence. Senator, I'm just curious. Since you understood their economic struggles so well, since you were their authentic voice, how many of those struggling communities did you bring investment to? Vance's jaw tightened. Venture capital doesn't typically invest in traditional manufacturing. So zero. That's not a fair characterization. 0 factories, 0 coal towns, 0 investments in the communities you wrote about. Crockett looked up. But you did invest in tech startups, in cryptocurrency, in companies requiring workers to have computer science degrees from Stanford. The venture capital industry focuses on high-growth technology sectors. Not very Appalachian, is it? Someone in the gallery coughed. It sounded like a laugh. Vance straightened his tie. This wasn't going as he'd expected. He thought Hillbilly Elegy would be safe ground. Congresswoman, I don't think it's fair to suggest that working in venture capital invalidates my authenticity. Crockett's eyebrows rose. I'm not suggesting anything, Senator. I'm asking questions. You wrote a book about forgotten Americans, then forgot about them for 5 years while you made millions in Silicon Valley. I'm just trying to understand the timeline. I didn't forget about them. The experience gave me insight into how capital flows, how investment decisions are made, which helped me understand why places like Appalachia were being left behind. So you had to become part of the problem to understand the problem. Vance's face reddened slightly. I don't see it that way. What was your salary at Mithro Capital? I don't see how that's relevant. Roughly. Were you making 6 figures? 7? Vance's silence was answer enough. While the people you wrote about were making what? 20,000 a year? 30 if they were lucky? Crockett leaned back. Senator, you wrote a book about how economic opportunity abandoned these communities. Then you took that book, turned it into a bestseller, and used the money and connections to get rich in the exact places that had abandoned them. Do you see why some might find that ironic? I used my platform to advocate. For what? Which policies did you advocate for between 2017 and 2021? Vance opened his mouth, then closed it. I've looked, Senator. I see media appearances, speeches about the book, but not much advocacy for actual policy changes to help Appalachia. What I see is you building a brand. The room grew quiet. Reporters typed furiously. Vance tried to regroup. I was in the private sector, not in government. I couldn't directly advocate for policy. But you had a platform. You were on every cable news show. You could have pushed for broadband infrastructure, addiction treatment, job retraining, any of the things you said these communities desperately needed. She paused. Instead, you used it to get rich and make connections in Silicon Valley. Those are just facts, Senator. Your facts. Vance's hands gripped the table. I don't appreciate the implication that I abandoned. Let me ask you something else. Crockett pulled out another sheet. In your book, you wrote about your grandmother. That she saved you. That she was the wisest person you ever knew. That's true. She didn't go to college, did she? No. Didn't graduate high school? Worked in a factory? Yes. So why do you think people like her shouldn't have as much say in our democracy as people like you? Vance blinked. I never said that. Really? Her voice turned to ice. July 2021. You gave an interview where you said, and I quote, "We are effectively run in this country by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and want to make the rest of the country miserable, too." That was taken out of context. You said people without children don't have a direct stake in the future, that they shouldn't have the same voting power as parents. Did you say that? Vance's face was fully red now. Your grandmother raised you. For a significant part of your childhood, she was functionally childless in her own home. By your logic, should she have had less say in democracy? That's completely different. Explain how. Vance's mouth worked. She had raised children. She had a stake. You said childless? Your grandmother's own children were adults. Was she miserable? Did she want to make everyone else miserable? You're twisting my words. I'm quoting them, Senator. That's the problem. The gallery was silent. Every eye was on Vance. Let's talk about something else, Crockett continued. Your wife, Fuchsia Vance. She's a lawyer, correct? Yale Law School, like you. Clerked for Justice Kavanaugh and Chief Justice Roberts. Now a partner at a major firm. Very accomplished. Does she have children? We have 3. And she works full-time while raising them. Must be exhausting. Does she ever seem miserable to you? Of course not. I'm just trying to understand your theory. You said childless women are miserable and want to make everyone else miserable. But what about women who have children and demanding careers? Are they miserable too? Or does having children cancel out the misery of being an ambitious woman? I never said ambitious women are miserable. Then what were you saying, Senator? Use small words. Vance took a breath. Our society has become more individualistic, less focused on family formation. That has political consequences. People without children vote differently because they have different incentives. So you were saying childless people are selfish. I was saying they have different priorities. Priorities that make them want to make everyone miserable. Those were your words. In a hyperbolic sense, yes. Crockett let the word hang. So you didn't really mean it. I meant there's a problem when people who don't have children have the same voting power as. He stopped himself. You were about to say it again, weren't you? Crockett leaned forward. You actually believe this? You believe your vote should count more because you have children? That's not what I said. Then what are you saying? Because every time you explain, it sounds worse. Vance's face was nearly purple. What I'm saying is we need to think seriously about incentive structures in our democracy, and whether some people should have more votes based on whether they've reproduced. Crockett's voice could cut glass. Senator, that's not conservative. That's not radical. That's anti-democratic. You're arguing against one person, one vote. You're devaluing people who don't form families the way you think they should, by saying they're miserable, by suggesting they shouldn't have equal say. You're putting words in my mouth. I'm reading your words back to you. Vance grabbed his water glass, his hand shaking. This was supposed to be a routine hearing. Instead, it was a public autopsy of every controversial thing he'd ever said. Congresswoman, I think we're getting off track. Are we? Because I think we're exactly on track. You wrote a book positioning yourself as the voice of working-class America, then made millions in Silicon Valley. You attack elites while being educated at Yale. You criticize childless people while your wife manages career and family. I'm trying to figure out who you actually are. Vance's voice rose. I know exactly who I am. Do you? Let's test that. Crockett pulled out more papers. Let's talk about Donald Trump. Vance's face went still. August 2016. You wrote an op-ed calling Trump cultural heroin. You said he provided an easy escape from economic pain but would ultimately make things worse. October 2016, you tweeted, I'm a never Trump guy. You called him an idiot, said you couldn't stomach voting for him. She read from another sheet. October 9, 2016. Trump makes people I care about afraid. Immigrants, Muslims, etc. Because of this, I find him reprehensible. Reprehensible. That's a strong word. I was concerned about his rhetoric. October 3, 2016, you texted a friend, I go back and forth between thinking Trump is a cynical Nixon or that he's America's Hitler. America's Hitler. Those were your words. I have since changed my opinion. We're not done yet. November 2016, you said his victory was electoral cyanide, that it would be a disaster. January 2017, you told Charlie Rose he was unfit for office. When did you realize you were mistaken? Because in June 2017, you were still criticizing him. I'll tell you when, 2021, when you decided to run for Senate. Suddenly, Hitler became a hero. The unfit candidate became the best president. What happened, Senator? Did Trump change, or did your ambitions? I saw his record in office and changed my assessment. Based on what? Which policy made you stop thinking he was Hitler? Was it the Muslim ban? Family separation? The Ukraine extortion? The attempt to overturn the election? Which one made you think you know what? I was wrong. This guy's great. The economy under his presidency was strong. GDP growth under Trump averaged 2.5% per year. Under Obama's last 3 years, it was 2.4%. So you went from Hitler to hero for 0.1% GDP growth. Unemployment fell, continuing a trend that started in 2010. But that's not my question. My question is about your character. You didn't say Trump had bad policies. You said he was Hitler. You said he made people afraid, was reprehensible, unfit. Those are moral judgments. I was wrong in my moral judgment. Or you never actually had one. Or you did and sold it. Her voice sharpened. In 2016, you were building credibility with never-Trump Republicans. You positioned yourself as principled. Then Trump won, and you saw there was no future in opposing him. So you calculated. You looked at your ambitions and decided your principles weren't worth keeping. That is absolutely. Then explain it. Vance's hands gripped the table. Explain how someone goes from Hitler to hero without it being a calculated political move. Explain how everything you said about him being dangerous, unfit, reprehensible, how all that disappeared the moment you decided to run for Senate with his endorsement. I changed my mind based on his record. What record? What specifically made you reassess the Hitler comparison? The judicial appointments. The judicial appointments made you stop thinking he was Hitler. So Neil Gorsuch is nice enough that you're okay with Hitler as long as he appoints good judges? You're twisting what I'm saying. I'm asking you to explain what you said. You said Hitler? Not me. You. And then you endorsed him. So either your Hitler comparison was a lie in 2016, or your endorsement was a lie in 2022. Which was it? The room was silent. Every reporter had stopped typing. Both statements were made in good faith based on my understanding at the time. So you really believed he was Hitler in 2016? I believed he could be dangerous. Hitler dangerous. That was hyperbole to express your concerns. And in 2022, when you endorsed him, was that also hyperbole? Vance's face was bright red. I genuinely believe that Trump's policies are good for. You can't have it both ways, Senator. Either you were lying then, or you're lying now. Either you never really believed he was Hitler and were just scoring points, or you actually believed it and abandoned that belief when it became politically inconvenient. Which is it? Vance's hands were shaking. It says I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong. Or willing to say whatever gets you elected. That's not fair, is it? You wrote about Appalachia, then abandoned them for Silicon Valley. You attack elites while being one. You criticize childless women while your wife balances career and family. You compared Trump to Hitler and endorsed him. Every position you take depends on which way the wind is blowing. I have deeply held beliefs. Name one. One belief you've held consistently. One position you haven't changed for political expediency. Vance opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I'm waiting. His voice was defensive. I've always believed in protecting American workers from unfair trade. You worked in venture capital funding companies that outsourced manufacturing to Asia. I've always believed in strong families. You said childless people are miserable and shouldn't have equal votes. I've always believed in conservative values. You went to Yale Law, worked in Silicon Valley, made millions in venture capital. The only thing conservative about you is your donor base. The room was silent except for typing. Crockett shuffled her papers. Her voice grew quieter, almost curious. You know what I think, Senator? I think you're very good at reading rooms. You read the room in Appalachia and wrote a book telling them their struggles mattered. You read the room in Silicon Valley and said you could find the next unicorn. You read the room in the Republican primary and said Trump was great. You're a political chameleon. That's not true. Then who are you, really? Strip away the performances, the calculated positions, the focus-grouped messaging. Who is J.D. Vance? Vance's face cycled through anger, confusion, panic. I'm someone who grew up in difficult circumstances and worked hard to create opportunities. So you're the bootstrap story? Poor kid makes good. I'm someone who understands both worlds. So you're the bridge between elite and working class. I'm a conservative who believes in traditional values. So you're the values voter, the family man. Vance stopped, his mouth slightly open. And you don't know, do you? Crockett's voice was almost gentle. You've been so many people you've lost track of which one is real. Vance found his voice, harder now. I know exactly who I am. I'm a United States senator fighting for working families. You're a senator who got elected with Trump's endorsement after calling him Hitler. Let's not pretend this is about policy. Everything I do is about policy. Really? You voted against the infrastructure bill, the one bringing billions to Ohio, to Appalachia, to the communities you wrote about. Why? It was filled with wasteful spending. It was roads, bridges, broadband, everything you said these communities needed. But you voted no. Why? It wasn't paid for. It added to the deficit. You voted for Trump's tax cuts that added $2 trillion to the deficit. That's different. How? Tax cuts stimulate growth, but infrastructure doesn't? Building roads doesn't create jobs? Expanding broadband doesn't help rural businesses? She leaned forward. Or was it just that Biden proposed it, so you had to vote against it, even against your own constituents? I vote on principle. Which principles? The ones where Trump is Hitler, or where he's great? Where you care about Appalachia, or where you make millions in Silicon Valley? Where family matters, or where childless people are lesser? Which principles? Because from here, they seem very flexible. I resent the implication. You can resent it. But answer, why did you vote against infrastructure for the communities you claim to care about? Vance's voice rose. Because that bill wasn't really about infrastructure. It was about expanding government, creating bureaucracies. About bringing jobs and investment to Ohio, which you voted against while claiming to be the voice of working-class Ohioans. You're oversimplifying. I'm asking why you voted against your own book. Your thesis was these communities need investment. When it was on the table, you said no. Explain that. The bill was bad policy. For whom? For Silicon Valley venture capitalists or for factory workers in Youngstown? Vance slammed his hand on the table. I voted my conscience. The sound echoed. Crockett didn't flinch. Your conscience. She opened another folder. Let's talk about that conscience. Specifically elites. You talk a lot about elites, coastal, out-of-touch elites who look down on real Americans. I do, because it's a real problem. We have a ruling class completely disconnected from. Where did you go to college? The question stopped him cold. I went to Ohio State. And after that? Silence. After that, Senator? Where did you go after Ohio State? Yale Law School. Yale. One of the most elite institutions in the world. The school that's produced 5 of the last 7 presidents. That Yale. And where did you meet your wife? At Yale. Your very accomplished, very elite Yale-educated wife. And after Yale, where did you work? I clerked for a federal judge. An elite position for top graduates of elite law schools. And after that? I worked at a corporate law firm. Sidley Austin. One of the biggest, most elite firms in the world. And then where? I've explained this. I worked in venture capital in Silicon Valley. The most elite concentration of wealth and power in human history, working for billionaire Peter Thiel, investing in companies that only hire from elite universities, making millions while living in San Francisco, the second most expensive city in America. That's your career path, Senator, Ohio State, then straight to the top, Yale, federal clerkship, white shoe law firm, Silicon Valley venture capital. You didn't just join the elite. You speedran it. Someone laughed in the gallery, then tried to muffle it. I came from a working-class background. And you escaped it as fast as you could. You got every credential the elite values, made every connection, went to every place they go. And now you pretend you're still one of the people you left behind. I haven't left anyone behind. You left everyone behind. That's the point of your success story. You got out. You made it. You became one of them. Crockett leaned forward. And there's nothing wrong with that. Social mobility is good. Education is good. Success is good. What's not good is pretending you're still the poor kid from Middletown when you're a Yale-educated millionaire venture capitalist living where the average home costs $2 million. I've never pretended. You've done nothing but pretend. You campaign in Ohio talking about coastal elites, then fly back to your elite neighborhood, send your kids to elite schools, vacation at elite resorts. You attack people for being out of touch while being completely out of touch yourself. That's not fair. You gave a speech attacking universities as woke indoctrination centers. You want to cut their funding, investigate professors, suggest college degrees are the problem. And yet, where did you get your education? Having an elite education doesn't mean I can criticize. It means you're a hypocrite. You used every advantage the elite system offers. Your Yale degree got you every job. Your entire career was built on the credential from the institution you now attack. How does that work? Vance's voice was strained. I'm criticizing the ideological capture of these institutions, not education itself. You're criticizing the very system that made you. The system that took a kid from Middletown and gave him opportunities he never would have had. Yale didn't just give you an education, it gave you a network, connections, access, your wife, your career. Your entire life was made possible by the elite institutions you now demonize. I'm grateful for my education, but I can still see problems. What problems? That they let people like you in? That they give opportunities to working-class kids? Or that they also let in people who don't look like you, think like you, vote like you? Vance's fist clenched. That's not what I'm saying. Then what? Because it sounds like you climbed the ladder, got to the top, and now want to kick it down so nobody else can follow. You got your Yale degree, your elite credentials, your access to power, and now you tell working-class kids universities are bad, education is suspect, maybe they shouldn't aspire to what you did. I'm saying the system is broken. For whom? It worked fine for you. Yale opened every door. Your law degree got you jobs most people dream of. Your connections made you rich. The system worked perfectly for J.D. Vance. It's only broken now that you're at the top and don't want anyone else coming up behind you. The room was silent. Vance looked physically struck. Crockett wasn't done. You know what's telling? In your book, you're sympathetic. You understand why Appalachia struggles, the structural problems, the lost opportunities, the addiction. You get it. She paused. But then you became elite. You made money, got power, and suddenly, in your political career, those same people aren't victims of structure anymore. Now they're making bad choices, need to pull themselves up, are culturally dysfunctional. What changed, Senator? Did the problems change, or did you? The book was never about excusing bad behavior. It was about understanding, seeing people in their full humanity, recognizing poverty and addiction aren't just personal failings. They're systemic. That's what made the book powerful. You saw them clearly. I still see them clearly. No, you don't. You see them the way all elites see poor people, as problems to manage, voters to manipulate, props for your narrative. The compassion you had when writing the book, when you were still close enough to remember, it's gone. You've become what you used to criticize. Vance shook his head. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Crockett pulled out a worn paperback. This is from your book, page 148. I realized that I was more or less a stranger, speaking a language I'd learned in a foreign land. My accent had shifted. My vocabulary had expanded. I used words that people back home simply didn't use. You wrote that about how you changed, how you no longer quite belong. That's honest, Senator. That's real. You acknowledge the distance. I did. So why pretend it doesn't exist? Why campaign as if you're still that kid from Middletown when you're a senator living in $1 million home, socializing with billionaires? Because I remember where I came from. Remembering isn't the same as being. You're not that kid anymore. You haven't been for 20 years. You're a member of the elite, a card-carrying member of the American ruling class. Admit it, and you can stop pretending. Vance's voice was barely audible. I've never forgotten my roots. Your roots are at Yale now. Your roots are in Silicon Valley. Your roots are wherever your money and power come from. The people in your book were your past. They're not your present, and they're sure as hell not your future. The silence was profound. Vance sat breathing hard, his face the color of raw meat. He looked like a man who'd walked into an empty room and found a firing squad. Crockett gathered her papers slowly. Let me tell you what I see, Senator. I see someone who wrote a compelling book about real pain. I see intelligence, talent. I see someone who could have used that platform to actually help the people he wrote about. She paused. Instead, I see someone who used those people as a stepping stone. Who turned their suffering into a bestseller and walked away. Who made millions in the exact places that abandoned them. Who flip-flopped on every major position when politically convenient. Who attacks people for being childless, elite, without real values, while embodying all those things himself. Vance shook his head. You don't understand. What don't I understand? Help me. I've read your book, your op-eds, watched your interviews. I see someone very good at performing authenticity but very bad at actually being authentic. That's not true. Then show me. Be authentic. Tell me one thing you really believe. Not a talking point, not a focus grouped message. One real thing. Vance's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I believe our country has lost its way. That we're too focused on individualism, not enough on community. That we need to rebuild the institutions that bind us together. Beautiful. Which institutions? The unions you refuse to support? The public schools you want to defund? The government programs you call socialist? The family, the church, local communities. But not childless people. They don't count. I didn't say that. You did say that. You keep saying things, then claiming you didn't. That's the problem. Vance's voice dropped to a whisper. What do you want from me? The truth. Just once. Why you changed your mind about Trump. Why you voted against infrastructure for Ohio. Why you attack elites while being one. Who you really are underneath all the personas. I've told you. You've told me talking points. You haven't told me the truth. Vance stared at her, then at the table, then at his hands. When he looked up, something had changed. The performance had cracked. You want the truth? The truth is, I wrote that book because I was angry. Angry at where I came from. Angry at the dysfunction, the cycle of poverty and addiction destroying people I cared about. I wanted out. The book was my ticket. His voice was raw, unpolished. I went to Yale to be as far from Middletown as possible. I went to Silicon Valley for the same reason. I worked in venture capital because it was the opposite of where I came from. And yeah, I made money, a lot, and it felt good. Like I'd finally escaped. He continued, his laugh bitter. And Trump? Trump was my ticket back in. I'd escaped, but I was nobody. Just another Yale grad in tech. The book gave me a name, Trump gave me an opportunity. All I had to do was stop calling him Hitler and start calling him a savior. Pretend I'd always supported him. Sell out every principle I claimed to have. He looked directly at Crockett. So yeah, you're right. I'm a chameleon. A fraud. I'm whatever I need to be to stay relevant, because the alternative is going back to Middletown, and I'd rather die than go back there. The room was absolutely silent. Crockett stared. Did you just admit all of that? Vance blinked, as if waking from a dream. His face went pale. That was off the record. Senator, you're under oath in a Senate hearing. There is no off the record. You meant every word. For the first time today, you told the truth. Her voice wasn't triumphant. It was almost sad. And the truth is you'd rather be a fraud in Washington than real anywhere else. Vance stood suddenly, his chair scraping. I need to. Sit down, Senator. He sat, looking smaller, deflated. Crockett closed her folder. I have no further questions. No one moved for a long moment. Reporters sat frozen, unsure if what they'd witnessed was real. Had a sitting senator just admitted to abandoning his principles for political gain? Had he confessed his entire political identity was a performance? Chairman Warner cleared his throat. Does anyone else wish to question the witness? Silence. Senator Vance, you're dismissed. Vance stood slowly, gathering his papers with shaking hands. As he walked toward the door, he looked like a man watching his career implode in real time. At the door, he paused, turned back, opened his mouth as if to speak. Nothing came out. He left. That night, the clip would go viral. Just a moment, the confession. Vance's face as he admitted everything was a performance. His voice saying, I'd rather die than go back there. The line would be repeated endlessly, analyzed, memed, turned into a symbol of everything hated in modern politics. But in the hearing room, after Vance left, there was just silence. Crockett sat still, hands folded. She wasn't smiling or gloating. She just looked tired. Someone had asked who J.D. Vance really was. Now everyone knew, he was whoever he needed to be, until the moment he couldn't be anyone at all. When you perform authenticity for so long, what happens when someone asks you to be real? When every position is calculated, every word focus grouped, what happens when someone demands the truth? When your entire identity is built on telling people what they want to hear, what happens when you accidentally tell them what they don't? We just found out.